So it's 5 past midday, and we start our webinar. Is the first webinar of the year, of the first UDA webinar of the year. And we have the pleasure today to present a joint project with UNODC and WHO. And especially it's our honor and pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of the European Union Drugs Agency, Dr. Lorraine Nolan, and I would give immediately the floor to you. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Marika. And the first thing I want to say is welcome everybody to this webinar, and welcome to everybody from all the countries across the world, Europe and beyond. And I have to admit, what such an exciting start to this webinar. I am the new Executive Director of the European Union Drugs Agency, so this is my first experience of being involved in a webinar like this, and so exciting to see all the countries joining. And because I am new to the agency and I have just joined on the 1st of January, I think I would like to begin, if you will permit me, with giving you a little bit of introduction to myself and my background, because it does have a relevance to the topic that we are discussing today. So prior to joining the agency, I was the Chief Executive of the Medicines Regulatory Agency, which is known as the Health Products Regulatory Authority in Ireland. You probably hear from my voice, I am Irish. I am from Dublin. And I was the chief executive of that organization for 10 years. So my background is a scientist, and for those of you that may be on the webinar today and familiar with medicines regulation, it is really an evidence-driven science and process, evaluating the benefits and risks of medicines and putting them on that road to seeking marketing authorization and approval to be placed on the market, and then of course the monitoring of medicines throughout the life cycle, because the evidence constantly emerges and it constantly evolves. And I do think the background I have is very relevant to what we will be discussing today, so I am particularly interested in this webinar. I've had over 30 years experience in that area, which is long, but in the early part of my career, my background was as a forensic scientist working with the Ministry of Justice in Ireland in the forensic profiling of illicit drugs and substances. And in the early years of my career with the Medicines Agency in Ireland, I would have had a role in supporting our Ministry for Health in policy development relating to controlling drugs under our misuse of drugs legislation. The areas that I've worked on particularly was the response of emerging psychoactive substances to the head shop phenomenon in Ireland in the around the period of time of 2009, 2010. And in addition to that, I have also worked with the ministry on the development of the medicinal cannabis access program in an area that kind of overlapped with medicines regulation, and indeed the design of the program nationally. So I think that's probably enough of my background for an introduction for today, and I think we need to move on with the business of the webinar. And something I really want to say, even though we still have participants joining us, Marika has told me that we had over 600 colleagues that were actually registered for the webinar today. And I think that is a very large level of registration for this. And it shows the huge interest in the work of EUDA. And I guess also, I think the strong commitment across countries, but also professional communities to evidence-informed responses to the drug challenges that we face. As Marika has said, this is our first webinar in 2026, which is a really busy year for the organisation. Not only have we new leadership in my joining the agency, but we also in Europe have a new European drug strategy. And this year, the agency will focus very much so on the development of our new strategy as an agency, bringing us to 2030, which is a little bit unbelievable that we are already talking about a new decade, bringing us to 2030. And it will, of course, align with the objectives under the new strategy. This is also the first of a series of webinars under the Scale Up initiative, and a little bit of recap, I guess, on the Scale Up initiative. It is a joint initiative between the agency and our partners in the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, and also in the World Health Organization. And Scale Up is focused on expanding evidence-based responses to stimulant use and stimulant use disorders. And specifically, what this webinar series is aiming to address is progressively the various aspects of stimulants use disorders from the perspective of treatment and also care. I have to say, for us as an agency, one of the key objectives, which aligns very well with our new mandate, is strengthening the availability of evidence based treatment options in response to the growing prevalence and increase of stimulant use. It's also a focus which is very much so echoed within the European Union drug strategy, and it's specifically called out in the context of the European Union drug strategy. Our webinar today focuses on the pharmacology aspects of treatment options, including ongoing clinical research and its outcomes. And that will set the scene for the next webinars that are to come in this series, which are focused on evidence-based psychosocial interventions and recovery management approaches. What these webinars are really designed to achieve is to advance a shared understanding and dissemination of robust evidence and support effective practice across Europe. And I really believe that the dissemination of high quality evidence is absolutely vital to support individuals that have psychostimulant disorders, but also their families and the communities in which they live. And while sound science is absolutely critical to this, we also need practical tools, we need shared learning and sustained investment in professional capacity. We know that globally, and particularly here in Europe, we are seeing, increasing availability and increasing widespread use of psychostimulants. Cocaine, in particular, continues to be absolutely central to that trend, and it has significant implications for our public health services, our social services, but also community well-being. And treatment responses are uneven and in many cases require further strengthening. And that's what we are really here to discuss today. Updated data, updated data on the European situation, of course, collated through our partners in the national focal contact points across Europe and our scientific networks, that will be made available in the 2026 edition of our European Drug Report, which will follow later this year. So just to come back to the Scale Up initiative before we formally enter the discussion today, researchers and clinicians under the Scale Up initiatives are intensively working to consolidate the available evidence and translate that into practical guidance for it. And an important element of the work under Scale Up is, of course, strengthening training and capacity development for professionals and decision makers. And while we must ensure that decision makers have access to up-to-date knowledge, opportunities for peer exchange and spaces for structured discussion are also so important to this work. And it's in this way that we can ensure that evidence is not only disseminated, but it's understood and that it is implemented by decision makers in terms of policy and also by professionals in terms of planning and treatment and practice determination. Webinars like today are so important in this regard for allowing discussion, exchange of different perspective, and having questions from a wide audience. So as an organisation, I just want to maybe move towards concluding the introduction today by saying that the European Union Drugs Agency remains firmly committed to providing robust evidence, to informing interventions, and to fostering dialogue between research and practice, and supporting training and capacity developments through collaborative platforms. We very much so see this as a necessary and really important part of sustained and evolving efforts to respond effectively to emerging drug challenges. I want to also thank our partners in the UNODC and the WHO, as well as everybody involved in preparing for today's session, for their close collaboration and expertise. And with that, I think it's time for me to complete the introduction and hand back to my colleagues in the agency who will bring us through the remainder of the session today.
Thank you very much, Director, for your words and this excellent opening for our webinar today. The number of people joining is continuously increasing, and I'm happy to pass the floor to our partner in UNODC, Giovanna Campello, a very close collaborator of us for long years. Giovanna, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marika. Thank you, Executive Director. Thank you, dear friends and colleagues. It's wonderful to see so many people connecting and even many names that I recognize. It's really wonderful to be among old friends, but also to reach out to new colleagues. And I will pick up from what Dr. Nolan just described to us. I think it's a wonderful place. And just give you some background more at the global level at why stimulants are a concern, not only in Europe, like Dr. Nolan described, but everywhere in the world. And a bit of why we started Scale Up, what we achieved so far, and then that we hopefully set the scene for some real examples of research and some way forward that Anya will introduce to us. So let me see. Aha, yes, it works. So what you should see on the screen is the summary from last year. As in the case of the EUDA, our updated data will come out in June, so in a couple of months. But I think that this is a good starting point to see. This is a general slide on drug use in general, but you can see here that there are a significant number of people in the world that had used stimulants, so amphetamines, cocaine, or ecstasy type substances at least once in the past year. Not the numbers of cannabis and opioids, but still significant. And here, I think what is also interesting to see is the situation among women who use drugs and how among people who use drugs in general, women have the highest percentage indeed among stimulants, cocaine, ecstasy type substances, and amphetamines. Hold that thought, because here we have some general data on people with drug use disorder and the huge treatment gap. Dr. Nolan was very diplomatic in mentioning the fact that there needs to be improvement, but in reality, the percentage of people with drug use disorder, of the 64 million people worldwide that have drug use disorder that are in treatment, is, I would characterize it as minuscule. And here you can see very clear data on how the treatment gap is much worse for women who use drugs and women than men who use drugs. This is all kind of drugs, of substances, not only stimulants, but it's not that in the context of stimulants the situation is better. In fact, maybe we will see how it is worse. And let us not forget that, of course, among people who use drugs, there is a significant part that injects. Injection drives a lot of morbidity and mortality. And among these, there are many people with hepatitis C or with HIV or both. And stimulants can also be injected. I had changed, I wanted to change a bit the order. Here, that's what I wanted to mention to you. Cannabis is the most prevalent psychoactive substance used worldwide. So what you don't see on this slide is cannabis. You see everything else. And what you're looking for is either a blue that is for amphetamine type stimulants, or green, that is all of the issues around cocaine. And if we start here from the Americas, of course, you can see high level of methamphetamine use and cocaine use in North America, and a situation characterized by cocaine production, trafficking, and use in Central and South America. If we move Europe, I will not add much to the description that Dr. Nolan just presented. I would just move straight on to Africa. In Africa, the issues is more linked to cocaine trafficking and the spillover in the local market. But we know the cocaine trafficking is increasing, and so we see issues of use around in West Africa and in Southern Africa as well. Moving east, you can see the blue takes over. It's really a lot of use of amphetamine type stimulants. In Central Asia, you have methamphetamine manufacture, trafficking, and use. In the Gulf area, methamphetamine and captagon trafficking and use. And in South Asia, which is a region that traditionally was so more prevalent of opiates and opioids, we can see an expanding amphetamine type stimulant markets. In East and Southeast Asia, we really see a large methamphetamine market, which is also accompanied by issues of cocaine use in Oceania, Australia, and New Zealand. So this is the picture globally. As you can see, stimulant use disorder, stimulant use is not only an issue in Europe, far from it, is a global issue. And what we need to remember is that the market is expanding. There is increasing availability. Here you can see the cultivation of coca bush and production of cocaine, and you can see how it is increasing. Follow the green. Here you can see the global quantity of drugs seized, and you can see the trends very clearly increasing for amphetamines type stimulants and cocaine. And even if we look at new psychoactive substances, these are substances that go in and out of the market sometimes even very quickly, and that are not necessarily controlled, and they are very heterogeneous group of substances. But look here, a significant proportion, well, 1/3 of new psychoactive substances in the global markets are stimulants. So there is a strong availability and increasing, and this will be reflected in trends in use and drug use disorder. And we need to be better equipped to bridge the treatment gap that I was mentioning, but also address some particular issues that I will explain now. Treatment, there are specific challenges that are connected to the treatment and care of people who use stimulants and people with stimulant use disorder. Current treatment strategies are often not appealing for patients. They're not often based in scientific evidence. There are some that are based on evidence, but they're not used very often. And as a result, the individual with problematic stimulant use rarely seek treatment or face barriers in accessing treatment. And in some countries, stimulant use is associated with human rights concerns. We see a lot of compulsory treatment around stimulant use disorders and or severe marginalization. So very strong socioeconomic vulnerabilities that compound, that make it difficult to support the health and, if they so wish, the recovery of people who use stimulants and people with stimulant use disorder. And this is because, and this is part of the work that we presented in the standards here and in a deep dive that we did through this discussion paper. And as was also mentioned, no country has yet approved a medication for the treatment and care of stimulant use disorders. Yes, there are medications to alleviate withdrawal and intoxication cases and so on, but not for treatment. And there are evidence-based and effective interventions. They are mostly psychosocials and not used very widely. And so it is within this background that in 2024, UNODC launched the Scale Up initiative, and we were so delighted and honored in 2025 to have EUDA and WHO join us, and therefore to be able to make this truly a joint initiative. And our idea is really to find different ways, all possible ways to, I'm going to do a pun, I'm sorry, but to stimulate research on finding good solutions for stimulant use disorder. Solutions that can be used at scale and in an equitable way, so that it's not only people that have strong socioeconomic capital that can access them. And this goes for both people and countries. So we have 4 strands of work to achieve this objective. I will not go through this in detail, because I'm going through each one of them in turn. The first one is advocacy. We are trying in every possible way to bring this to the attention of the international community, and specifically, particularly, of course, among the member states of the United Nations. We have been addressing the Commission on Narcotic Drugs every time we could, through side event, formal meetings in plenary, and so on. And we were extremely delighted to see that Norway and Thailand got into pick up the message and tabled the resolution that was endorsed now last year in March 2025. And it's a resolution where member states, as a consensus, have agreed that this issue is important, is urgent. Research and treatment for stimulant use disorder needs to be expanded, and took notice with appreciation of the Scale Up initiative. But we also try to find any opportunity to present the initiative and to talk with researchers in scientific fora. And then, of course, the benefits of partnering with an organization such as EUDA and WHO means that we can participate in this kind of webinars and reach colleagues that we might not be able to reach on our own. And we're very grateful for this. And we need to continue to bring this to the attention of policymakers, but also practitioners and the general public. There are, as I was mentioning, at least some psychosocial, particularly interventions that are effective, and they could be used. And we want to start from where we are, and we have been, on the basis of existing materials, reaching out and through our field office network, been in contact with some practitioners, some policymakers, using our existing materials. And through Scale Up, we are committed to create some joint training materials from all of the organizations that could really support policymakers in choosing evidence-based practice, practitioners improving their practice, and so on, and really start, at least from what we know, without waiting for the new research, but promoting what is effective at this stage. In the meantime, we also, as I was mentioning, try to keep in contact with all the colleagues around the world that are undertaking research or to start clinical trials on treatment for stimulant use disorders. Don't get fooled by the picture. I'm not very good at taking screenshots, so you have a small screenshot, although maybe you can recognize some familiar faces. But we have some 30 plus researchers from all over the world that we are in contact with, that are undertaking active scientific research, and they are or trial in the issue. And we meet every 2 months to update each other about what is going on, and more recently to really start thinking how we can move this forward. What can we do to expand the research on stimulant use disorder and arrive at those new solutions that the world needs so much. And in this context, let me take a few seconds of your time to honor a colleague that passed away far too soon last year. Peter Blanken, that many of you know, was a researcher from the Netherlands. He was with us from the very, very beginning. He participated in the development of the deep dive that I mentioned before, publication that I mentioned before, and from the very beginning of the a research exchange platform, generously sharing his ideas and his science. And so I wanted to acknowledge and pay tribute to this. Thank you, Peter, for being such a wonderful person, colleague, and scientist, and being so generous with yourself and your ideas all throughout these years. And the last part is maybe the most important part, and the part about which I will speak the least. So one of the original ideas with Scale Up was to create sort of a protocol of a multi-site study. We had done this before, and it was a protocol that could be then used by anybody doing research in the field, so that we would have more and more studies that are compatible, whose outcomes, methodology, and so on are compatible and could, you know, really reinforce each other. Thinking about systematic review of the evidence, or a meta-analysis that doesn't end up saying there are too many studies of poor qualities and they are all too heterogeneous in their outcome measures, and therefore we cannot really come out with any conclusion. We wanted to promote science that could really build on each other, and so and really help us come nearer to a better solutions for people with stimulant use disorders. And after many discussions with the colleagues in WHO, with the colleagues in EUDA, with the many researchers and studies that we have been in contact with, we have thought that to stimulate and support research, it would be very, very beneficial to support, or at least start, the preparatory phases of a process that is the methodology of which has been developed by WHO and is called Target Product Profile. And it is a process that has been used in the past and has been incredibly effective. I mean, has been used in the past, not so much in the substance use thematic area, but in other health areas, and has been incredibly effective in focusing the research of all of the world, so that the research could build on each other, like I was mentioning before. And I'm just leaving it at that, because in reality, this will be more detailed in Anya's presentation, and that can really bring to life a bit the methodology, but the wonderful effect that what TPPs, like they are called for short, have had in the past, and that could have in our field too. And with this, let me conclude and thank you all for your interest, for your collaboration, and really hoping to expand and build on it, and looking forward to the discussion first of all, and then to keeping in touch later on. Over.
Thank you, Giovanna. Thank you very much for setting the scene where this important project initiated, and also to show the commitment of so many people to really provide people-centered intervention, evidence-based responses. With this, I would give the floor to one of our researchers, Fateme Chalabian-Lo. And yes, Fateme, please introduce better yourself and go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation to could present at our trial from Norway. It is a great honor for me to be here today and to speak about the national clinical trial that we have on substitution treatment of amphetamines use disorder in Norway. I'm working as a research leader and also associate professor in Bergen at University Hospital of Bergen and the University of Bergen in Norway. So just go ahead. Yeah, I have no commercial conflicts to declare, and this work is supported by National Program for Clinical Treatment Research and the Norwegian government. Just a brief overview on the situation in Norway. It is amphetamines that are most commonly used substances after cannabis in Norway, and they are estimated that about 11,000 problem users of amphetamines is in Norway, but it is uncertain estimations. So we suppose that it is much more people with these problems. And what is important that about half of these patients are socially marginalized, and most of them, many of them, they don't have under treatment for their conditions. So and the most common drugs injected in Norway, amphetamine is one of them, together with heroin. This is a major concern in Norway with injecting drug use, and we know that people who inject drug, they are the most marginalized and high-risk population. It is about 9,000 people who inject drugs in Norway. And among patients who are undergoing opioid agonist treatment, OAT, it is also range of different reports, self-reported use of amphetamines from 16.
Fateme was frozen. Let's see if we can have her back.
To 50% about reported by the patients, so which increase the risk of dropout from treatment, and also challenge, and one of the challenges in OAT. So with regard to the treatment, the common practice in Norway is psychosocial approaches like psychological treatment methods, as mentioned. And we have also a great focus in Norway on social.
There are issues with Fateme connection. I really regret. If we don't solve it, maybe we advance with Tiago and then we get back to Fateme as soon as the issues are solved. Tiago, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
If you prefer, I can jump in and continue from here.
I think it's good because we give some time to Fateme to recover her. So Anna is promptly changing the slides. So sorry, our audience, we have already been there. It has happened already. It's a part of the game. And we move to another investigator in our scale-up project, Tiago Marques Fidalgo. Please, Tiago, go ahead. And then we try to solve the issue with Fateme meanwhile. Thank you, Tiago. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think maybe Fatima is back. Do you want to go back to her, or
Fateme, now you are on mute.
I'm sorry, the network is very unstable, so I did miss the connection. Can I continue or?
If you feel like, yes. Sorry,
Yeah,
Tiago. This is
yeah,
part of
I'm
the
so
No?
game.
sorry. Yeah.
So people know that we are not recording, that we are live. Anna, sorry, can you get back to the Fateme slides? I would like people appreciate the flexibility and promptness of our team. The only way we survived 6 years of webinar started during the COVID. Fateme, please go ahead.
Yes, I will try to go fastly through. So to the trial, Atlas for Dependence trial that we have, which is commissioned and funded by the Norwegian government, as I said, and we have established a national research network, NORCATS, after that to investigate the effect of different substitution treatments in substance use disorders. And one of those is a study that we have, Atlas for Dependence, which is a multi-center double-blind RCT to investigate the effect of dextroamphetamine substitution in the use of illicit amphetamines in patients with amphetamine dependence. And we estimate to need 226 patients who were assigned to two arms. The intervention arm received dextroamphetamine immediate release tablets containing 30 milligram each, twice daily administered, and with flexible dosage of from 30 to 120 milligram a day. And the control arm will receive placebo tablets, which are identical to dextroamphetamine. And the period is 12 weeks. So the major or primary objectives of the study to assess the impact of this intervention on illicit amphetamine use, and we will measure that with two tools. One is urinary test to test the difference in the mean, in the proportion positive urinary test on illicit amphetamines during the intervention period, and by self-reports to assess differences in the mean total self-reported quantity, because this two primary outcomes reflect different risks associated to the use of the amphetamines. For example, cardiovascular risk is associated to the quantity of use. And we have some secondary outcomes to assess the impact of this intervention on the particularly mental health and quality of life, and the range of other secondary outcomes. And most importantly, we will conduct a cost effectiveness analysis using data from private economy, clinical criminal activity, and healthcare service utilization. So and we also conduct a qualitative sub-study where we investigate self-reported or self-perceived experiences, both from the patients and from the healthcare givers around such a kind of intervention, substitution with amphetamines, which is quite new treatment in Norway. So very shortly, a flowchart of the study. After information and recruitment, we will assess the eligibility of the patients, and when it is confirmed and patient consented, so we go to the baseline assessments before randomization to the two equally arms, as I said. And we start the intervention with dose titration in about 1 to 2 weeks to find the right dose for each patient, because it is depend on the use of illicit amphetamines before inclusion in the study. So it is flexible doses that we have to find during these weeks, and then go to the stable dosage in 12 weeks before dose tapering and endpoint assessments at 12-week trial. And we have also a follow-up assessment at 52 weeks. Sorry. The main inclusion criteria to be included is dependence to amphetamines according to ICD.
Unfortunately, is again frozen. We are not lucky with this connection from the north today. Shall we give 2 minutes? Otherwise, it will be difficult for our audience to follow back and forth.
Yeah, maybe if she switches off her camera, maybe it would alleviate a bit.
I'm not sure if she can hear now us.
No, it's very possible.
Okay, probably she heard because she switched off the camera. What we can see from her presentation is how difficult it is conducting research in this area, because disentangling individual different problems with the effect of pharmacological interventions is really challenging. And this, in a way, brings us to the next point. Go ahead, Fateme. Nice to see you again. Please. There is a suggestion from one of my colleagues saying that you could call from the phone, but I see you now, you are normally moving. Fateme, please go ahead. Can you hear us? It doesn't look like she can hear us. Okay.
I'm so sorry. Are you hearing me?
Yes, fine.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happens, but yeah, exclusion criteria for the study. If you can hear me, we have some major exclusion criteria, including somatic or symptomatic somatic conditions like cardiovascular risks and the risk of psychosis. I cannot go ahead in the slides. I don't know why.
We see the slides going ahead.
Oh, okay. I can't see them, but okay, if you see. I saw, yeah, okay. So I have to go back. So the majority of the exclusion criteria, the most challenging criteria is somatic and psychiatric disorders, specifically psychosis, active psychosis symptoms and cardiovascular risks. And also we have some other exclusion criteria like the risk of violence, and inability to cooperate or collaborate with about the follow-up of the study protocol, and inability to complete the procedure. So it is a very common exclusion criteria, and it is the reason that we cannot include so many patients that we have supposed initially. But we started this study in October 2024, and you see that we got large social attention in social media, and we have collaboration with many user organizations and that support this study. By now, we have screened 80 patients, of which about 45 are included in the study, and unfortunately, about half are excluded due to exclusion criteria. And we are excited to see if we can include all the patients during 26, 27, that is the trial period. And at the same time, we have started a qualitative sub-study, as I said, that this is very important supplement to the quantitative study, because it will give and provide us insights into individual variations and perceived benefits and harms. and the factors that may facilitate or hinder successful recovery, as I said. So it is an important part of the study. And at the end, I have some reflections about what characteristics should a future effective medication and treatment have. I don't have, this is a very, very big question, and don't have the answers, but some reflections about what kind of medications and formulations of the medications and treatment framework do we need to could succeed with such type of interventions. And it is many factors, but among others, it is patterns of use, types of stimulants, as
frozen away again on this important slide. We owe to Fateme another webinar, I would say, without interruptions. We wait for one more minute. Someone else
prevalent in
from
this patient group, both somatic and psychiatric disorders. So it is important to do individually assess benefit risk evaluations in each case. And at least it is important to have a well-established frameworks for substitution treatment, like the framework that we have, for example, for OAT, to ensure stability and sustainability of treatment delivery, and also clinical follow-up to ensure effectiveness and safety. And finally, integration of pharmacotherapy with psychosocial interventions and other care systems. Thank you, and apologize for the disconnections.
Thank you very much, Fateme. It was an excellent presentation, really tapping on all the main issues related to this condition. We regret for the problems. You are not responsible. We will have more space for you in the future. And we move to Tiago presentation. Thank you, Tiago. Go ahead. You are on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Do you hear a terrible noise in the background? No? Oh, good, because I can hear it. I'm glad that you can't.
This is to test your focus.
Yeah, for sure.
We created obstacles to both the speakers to make sure to test your commitment and focus. Go ahead, please.
Each presenter has a personal challenge. For Fatma was the connection. For me will be the noise here in the neighbor. So if in any moment this disturbs or you can hear me, please let me know. I can go back and share once again, or maybe even change rooms. So thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you all for being here. It's a great pleasure to speak to such an international audience. And it's very a great honor to have to be a panelist with all these colleagues that I admire so much and that are so inspiring for me. And I think that one of the main issues that we would like to discuss in this webinar are the difficulties of making research on this specific theme, as Marika mentioned. So there are a lot of challenges, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the efficacy outcomes in specifically in pharmacological randomized controlled trials and specifically for cocaine use disorder. I'm an assistant professor of psychiatry at the Federal University of São Paulo here in Brazil. So cocaine use disorder is one of our major concerns in terms of public health, much more than methamphetamines, for instance, that are a huge challenge in Europe or in North America, Australia. But here in Brazil, here in South America, we are really worried about cocaine use disorder. So For the starts, I have no commercial conflicts to declare, and the data presented here, I will present some unpublished data that we have. This data were obtained from a non-funded study. It was a systematic review without any kind of funding. So if we go to the main guidelines or the main publications on how to treat uh, stimulant use disorder or even cocaine use disorder, so here I have just a few examples: the ASAM guideline, the mental health gap from the World Health Organization, this very good paper that was published in JAMA Open in 2021. So if we go to all of them, what we are going to find is that the highest recommendation for the treatment of stimulant use disorder are the psychosocial interventions with a specific highlight to contingency management. The evidence of its efficacy is strong. It's highly recommended by all treatments, by all the agencies, by all the guidelines. And if we go into the pharmacological interventions, what we are going to find in all these guidelines is that there are no approved medication. And then I think this leaves us with this question: why? Why there is no approved medications? And the simple answer for that question is that RCTs, they fail to show the efficacy of the tested medications. So if we didn't find efficacy, we can't recommend them. We can't say that they should be used. They can't be put in the guideline. But that leads us to another important question: efficacy for what? What are we calling efficacy? What is our goal when we are testing these medications? And that's a $1 million question, because this can make a huge difference in what you're going to find in your clinical trial, what you're going to measure, what expectations your patients and their families should have and can expect from the medication. And until now, all the studies, or most of the studies, they have abstinence as the main outcome. So abstinence seems to be the goal to be achieved. And when we say a medication doesn't work, most of the time we are saying that it doesn't work for abstinence. But is abstinence actually the best outcome? Is this the only outcome that should be pursued? Should we take a look? If not, should we taking a look at other outcomes? Which should be these other outcomes? The clinicians, researchers, and people with lived experience, do they agree on which one is the best outcome? Are we aligned in our expectations and what we expect from treatment? Is perfect the enemy of good? I mean, okay, abstinence maybe should be the best target, maybe should be what we expect from our patients. Maybe that's what they expect from themselves. But is this the only outcome that represents some kind of success? So shouldn't we aim for other outcomes that might represent maybe not perfection, maybe not the perfection that abstinence might be seen, but they may reflect an improvement? And finally, what is currently being researched? Is abstinence still the main star, the biggest star of the clinical trials? So with all these questions and the great work from UNODC, WHO, EUDA, the efforts to put all these researchers that Giovanna mentioned together. So with all these supports, we managed to have this very large group. You can see all our co-authors here. I'm just here talking about really a group effort on developing this research and these reflections. Also, I would like to take a moment to mention that Peter was here. Peter Blanken was actively involved in this paper elaboration with a lot of insights. An amazing person with very accurate observations. He really helped us to improve a lot this paper. And this whole group, we performed a systematic review on the efficacy outcomes used in randomized controlled trials, specifically for the pharmacological treatment of cocaine use disorders. This data is unpublished, so we submitted to two journals. We are waiting for feedback, so soon it should be ahead, and we are going to disseminate the published paper. But what we did, just to bring you an overview of what we developed here, it was a systematic review. We went through PubMed, Scopus, clinical trials, PsycNet, so all the main databases, and we found 226 clinical trials, randomized controlled clinical trials that use some kind of medication as an intervention. And we made all the screening of these papers. There are details here. We can go into them after in the Q&A, or maybe when the paper is published, you can go through it. But after this 226 initial findings, we included in this review 65 papers, and that's what I'm gonna talk about now. So among these 65 trials included, 36 define primary and secondary outcomes clearly. So that's one point that the first point that we should stop and take a look at, because that's half of the trials define clearly what's the primary, what's the secondary outcome, which is something that we should work to improve. We should have a higher number of trials clearly defining what they are looking for, what are their specific goals, what are the outcomes they are pursuing. Among those 36 trials that clearly define their primary and secondary outcomes, 28 had abstinence as the primary outcome, and 5 evaluated a composite outcome as the primary outcome. And composite outcome meant that they used different scores, but abstinence was the main component of these scores. And 3 of them didn't include abstinence. They went straight to craving. So craving was the primary outcome. So here we can see that from the 36 trials, 33 had abstinence, either as the main or as a main component of the outcome. So with this information, we could say that, oh, okay, so as you mentioned in the beginning, abstinence is the main outcome. That's clear, that's out of question. So we are all in the same page talking about the same thing. But that's not quite that simple, because then what is abstinence? How is abstinence measured? And then we find another problem, because abstinence was defined as the number of abstinent days, the number of negative urine tests, the abstinence at the end of the treatment. So the person after the 3-month follow-up, what was the final result after 12 weeks? It doesn't matter if the person used during this 3 months, so just the end of the treatment. The number of abstinent weeks, the duration of abstinence in an absolute number. So very different ways of defining abstinence. So even abstinence that should be a simple outcome to be evaluated. Oh, the person uses, the person doesn't use. It's not that simple. So it's not only about what we are measuring, but how we are measuring this. And in total, among the 65 paper trials that we reviewed, more than 100 different outcomes were measured. So you can see that there is a great number of different aspects that can be included in a trial, that can be evaluated. For instance, depression, depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, quality of life, ADHD symptoms, the amount used, how much money people spend in their use, this amount was reduced during the treatment, functionality, quality of family relationships, compliance to treatment, retention in treatment. So more than 100 different outcomes. I'm just mentioning some of the most common ones here. And even for the same outcome, as I said, for abstinence, that was evaluated differently. So, for instance, craving, which seems to be one of the most important outcomes for people with lived experience, craving was evaluated in 40 trials using 70 different instruments. So each trial used almost 2 different instruments for assessing craving. So that leaves us with a very huge problem when we design a clinical trial, when we look at the results, how we should interpret the results. When we say that the medications, they don't work, a vital question is they don't work for what? And does that mean that they don't work for anything, or is there some specific aspect in which they can be positive? So what we think it's worth discussing here is that sustained abstinence, although endorsed by the regulators, it reflects historical and neurobiological paradigms more than person-centered treatment goals. So why is abstinence the most evaluated outcome? Because that's what the regulators agencies, they require to approve a medication or not. But that reflects just some historical and neurobiological paradigms. And if we jump to the last topic, the last topic here, regulatory agencies, even them, they are now accepting drug use reduction as a valid intermediate outcome. So although it's not the most valuable one for the regulatory agencies, abstinence is still the main goal. They are more open, they are more flexible to this reduction in use as a valid outcome. But the trials that we are performing, they have not consistently incorporated this change. So most of the trials are still pursuing abstinence as their main goal. And restricting efficacy to abstinence risks labeling clinically meaningful improvement as treatment failure. So the person is still using, the person might have reduced its use, but this person has a better relationship with the family, got a job again, is studying, are making physical activities. I don't know, a lot of improvements in this person's life, and this can be labeled by a clinical trial as a treatment failure. Is that actually a treatment failure? Definitions and measurements of abstinence are highly heterogeneous, which limits comparability, which limits meta-analytic synthesis. So we know that meta-analysis is a very strong instrument, a very strong study design to help us to draw the recommendations, to establish the guidelines. And if we don't have a minimally homogeneous measures, this is impossible to be made. So the scientific community must talk together, must be together to discuss what we are going to measure, how we are going to measure. Craving seems to be highly relevant to people with lived experience, to people who use substances, but it's rarely treated as a primary outcome. So only 3 studies included craving as the primary outcome. As I said, 40 studies out of the 65 measured craving, but as a secondary outcome, less power to evaluate it. And craving, according to the people with lived experience, it's the most important outcome to relapse and distress. This is the most important outcome for them in their self-perception of quality of life. And also quality of life and functioning are infrequently assessed, even though they align closely with patient priorities, family priorities, and recovery. So the person might have reduced use, but or even maintain the same level of use, but the person is back to life, the person is back to the family, the person is back to society. Maybe we should consider this as a success of treatment. And this has been around, so this is a discussion that's been around since the beginning of the 2020s. Here is the NIH website with an editorial by Dr. Nora Volkov discussing this. So the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. We have a lot of things in between use and abstinence, substance use disorder and abstinence. There is a huge number of different outcomes that we should look to. And the progress in cocaine use disorder research require standardized mixed outcome sets that integrate biomedical, functional, and patient-centered, person-centered measures. Once again, I would like to thank this group. It was a very active group, a very informal, friendly group. So it's also great to see all of them when we go to the events, even if those are online events. It's always good to see everyone. I would like to also emphasize and give you a spoiler of the future works that are being developed. And some of the Australian colleagues here, particularly Krista Seafried and Nadine and Leon Axon, they are conducting a very similar systematic review focused on methamphetamine clinical trials and the outcomes that they are using for methamphetamines. So those are complementary works that should be out maybe in the next few months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tiago, for highlighting, as well as Fateme, all the critical issues, not only reporting your data and your analysis, but also launching the questions that we want to address with our work. And once again, thank you to Giovanna and Ania for putting together this amazing group of people that are really setting the lines for the future work. The question that came to my mind is, can a pharmacological intervention solve all the issues? Clearly not. This is also why we, as a sector, for example, are called health and social responses. It's really complex problems require complex whole of societies approach. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Ania Busse from WHO. Please, Ania, go ahead, introduce yourself better than I did.
Thank you so much, Marikan. It's a pleasure to be here. Greetings from Geneva, WHO headquarters, where I have the pleasure to be the team lead on alcohol, drugs, and addictive behaviors. And maybe just for those, I've joined WHO recently, a year ago. So, and before have worked many years with UNODC. So have seen the even scale up from those two sides. Now let's see also what my technical challenge is going to be today in the presentations. I can move the slides. That's already good. So just, I guess you all know WHO, kind of specialized health agency of the UN system, but I just wanted to highlight how this mission to access to affordable and adequate healthcare as a human right and the focus on universal healthcare aligns very much also with what we have put up together for the Scale Up initiative, right? So on one side, we want to have better treatments for psychostimulant use disorders, but we also keep in mind that it's not only good enough if we have better treatments for a few, but we need to think at the same time how innovations, or that what we have that's evidence-based already, can actually reach sufficient amounts of people in need. And on that, we're in general doing very, very poorly at the moment. And as said, only 8% of people with drug dependence have access to treatment services, and accessibility for therefore as a background needs to be key in all of these discussions we're now having around innovations and or pharmacological treatment options for the future. So I've just tried to, let's say, put up this little circle here to see where from innovation, research to implementation, evaluation, and so we are going, and what maybe shaped our thinking and the way forward in the Scale Up initiative. So on one side, I mean, there's all the work on identifying gaps, and UNODC, UDA, WHO and others kind of have global or regional monitoring frameworks and information systems up. And then there is this importance to articulate priorities. And I think an important priority was really when the member states of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, which is a sub-body of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, passed this resolution, kind of wanting to see better stimulant dependence treatment, but also kind of asking for more research on it. So that was a very helpful articulation of a priority. So, and then as you saw in Giovanna's slides, initially there was the idea that we saw across the three agencies, how can we help facilitate innovations or maybe even support evidence generations for others, or I have to say much more established medications. There have been multi-country studies where WHO and other agencies have been involved, and that maybe was for a moment the idea, but we realized also quickly, also as you've seen from the presentations from Tiago and Fateme, that much more research is really still needed, especially with a view to pharmacological treatment, right? So before, and that would then be a next step, guidelines could further be developed around that element in particular. But with the existing evidence in mind, in 2023, WHO made these recommendations that will become and will be integrated in the new Mental Health Gap Action Guide, which is going to be launched soon, but the evidence reviews are already available. And there were made a number of recommendations on psychostimulant use disorder treatment, but you have to keep in mind that this is particularly for non-specialized settings. So think primary healthcare, for example. I think, I mean, in a way, similar to what we've heard before, right? So there are strong recommendations for screening brief interventions and for psychosocial interventions, such as especially contingency management. Then there are a few additional recommendations with conditional strengths, right, of recommendation. Among them is that prescription psychostimulants like dexamphetamine and so on would not be recommended for treatment of cocaine or stimulant use disorders in non-specialized settings. I think this is what we need to keep in mind here. So basically it said we're not ready yet, including for safety concerns. Another thing I want to highlight here, that across all these areas, the quality of evidence was graded as either very low or low, right? So which still means a lot of work needs to be done, not only likely for non-specialized settings. This then also discussed, so to say, what is the future direction. And the authors, I had not joined WHO by then, right? But I think even Tiago was part of the drafting group to some extent, kind of especially highlighted the positive signs around medications used for other health disorders, such as mirtazapine, which is also an antidepressant, or the naltrexone bupropion combination. There was just a big trial that had come through and showed initial positive results, but also not overwhelmingly positive results, maybe, right? The other thing important to keep in mind as we're speaking scale is what can also be applied in low-middle income countries. And we have a very broad audience here in this webinar. I said to think of non-specialized settings and cost effectiveness when we get to that. So right now we find ourselves really in this stage that has been presented by the colleagues with a lot of challenges and some opportunities, right? So in a lot of regions that maybe traditionally had more opioid use disorders, either methamphetamine or cocaine, so to say, are becoming more prevalent. There is limited implementation of the evidence-based psychosocial interventions. We heard that even in Norway, right, a lot of people with stimulant dependence don't really have access or are not in treatment, and we've seen the global treatment gap. And just to remind, right, so currently there is no medication registered anywhere in the world for stimulant dependence treatment, despite these decades of research. But still, there is kind of an obligation, right, to provide better services for people in need and see how, from both psychosocial and pharmacological, and this gap can be addressed, approached, ideally closed or towards closing one day. So, and maybe an opportunity is that the research landscapes for pharmacological treatments is really dynamically changing, and quite a lot of research is going on in many parts of the world, and we are very grateful for these researchers to come together in the Scale-Up network. And as Thiago was saying, so we now have to really also think through and better understand which medication, for whom, for which outcome. Is it for craving? Is it for relapse prevention? Is it for people with comorbid ADHD? Is it for, and so on, right? So, because likely there's not going to be this one size fits many, at least in a similar way like we've maybe seen for opioid use disorder treatment. So also kind of where Scale-Up goes, we have reshifted a bit from this where we thought, okay, let's support evidence generation to maybe let's go back more to the beginning and see how we can support the articulation of priorities and the facilitation of innovations. And this is where the WHO product profile process comes in. And I want to say that this has never been applied for substance use disorders and also rarely for non-communicable diseases. So it would really be a novum to apply such a process, but we want to embark on that in the framework of the Scale-Up initiative, and I'll tell you a bit how these product profiles could be hopefully helpful, because they are there to really help articulate priorities and facilitate innovations. If WHO offers a product profile, it indicates to some extent that this is a significant unmet health need recognized by WHO, and therefore in itself kind of can become an important advocacy tool. And also, because, you know, it will give some directions, it can shape hopefully future research, or can influence at least future research, future development of health products. So that's the intended idea among them. There are different types of product profiles, and we think that, you know, in this situation where no medication is de facto available, right, even though actually most of the research medications are more kind of also already used, right, as a medicine, but for other type of health outcomes, the target product profiles would likely be the ones that fit our needs best. And so in addition to what I've said, they also take a strong stand on considering the end user perspective in their development. And what is hiding here behind facilitating stakeholder alignment on product characteristics is that the process of development is very important because it allows discussions with, for example, regulatory agencies, pharmaceutical companies, obviously people using drugs, policymakers, research, and so on. So, and to bring all of these different perspectives together into a product profile. So famous examples were the ones around developing the COVID diagnostics and the COVID vaccines. And so, and the question really behind is the one that Fateme, Thiago, and all others kind of have really brought up. If there were a medication for psychostimulant dependence, what would it need to achieve? What would be the features it would need to have? And hopefully the target product profile process could help kind of guide thinking this through. Now, we will not immediately be ready to embark on the entire steps for a target product profile for various reasons, but step one includes a landscape analysis, literature review, and consultation of experts. So what we're hoping to do in the next year, year and a half, is to start off this with at least step one and do the landscape analysis. So I will just zoom in for a moment on what these landscape analyses now do. And they're really, again, helpful and have a clear outline in terms of how to identify and characterize and
kind of published in that sense also as a publication coming from an international agency, in this case WHO, all the products that exist or are currently being developed in a specific topic area. So in that sense, it's really much more a mapping, right? And not the same as a systematic analysis or a systematic review or something like this. It's really much more a mapping, and the data sources are therefore also different. So they can include, for example, currently ongoing clinical trials, they can include grey literature, this can include expert consultations, we can involve WHO collaborating centers, and so on, right? So these are just common data sources that you see, and it really has to be thought through well which data sources are the most important in this regard. And then there is a kind of checklist, right? So we will need to think, what do we know, or what do we want to know, really? What is a question that we need to answer? So, and the work has in that sense not started. We have a few ideas, right? Like, what are the medications currently being researched, for example, right? But the question could also be formulated differently. And I show you an example in a moment from another area. And therefore to think who's our audience for the landscape analysis and so on. So this is a work that we will embark on. I wish I could have filled all of this for you already, but this is all really very new. We allow you in a way an insight into the workshop, and obviously it will be interesting also to hear from you about that. So here are just two examples of landscape analysis, one more from the area of HIV disease research, and the other which came from our department on improving access to medicines for neurological disorders. But here the question, because medicines in principle are available, which is different to what we are looking at in Scale Up, is what do we know about the barriers in terms of access to medicines, right? So that's the questions that the colleagues had asked more around neurological disorders. So, and coming to an end, the next steps will be therefore really to embark and unpack all the steps of the landscape analysis, and pending availability of future funding, see how we can go further with the development of a full product profile in the process as I have described. So I think the other thing, of course, to keep in mind is that while this takes place, hopefully, and it's good, that a lot of research will also happen, right? So in parallel to this, the research landscape is going to change, and surely we will need to bring in a lot of stakeholders to work jointly towards exploring if and there will be a future medication with efficacy, which then also will be convincing enough in the future to get regulatory approval at country level, right? So, and this is really a conversation that we all need to have together. Here you can have more information and examples on these processes from WHO. And with that, I really thank you for your attention and the possibility to join today, and hope you all got very interested in the Scale Up initiative overall. Thank you so much, and back to you, Marika.
Thank you, Anja, for this very important frame of our work and options for future steps. If I can add, from my former systematic reviewer point of view, the most important results you achieved with this project is to put researchers in contact before they publish, because as Giovanna said before, the conclusions of systematic reviews is always further investigation needed, outcomes not comparable. And as Fateme and Tiago showed us very clearly, there are many different ways of interpreting even the same outcomes when they exist. And this is an area where we can really work to make sure, first of all, we really work on people-centered interventions. And secondly, we work on synergies. And this is also the other, I think, added value of our work. Was started like with an invitation, friendly invitation, as Tiago said, learning from a group of people and then realizing that this is time of global challenges and big synergies. So I see there are many questions. They round about being people-centered, which is clearly one of the objectives of our collaboration. there is a recall about the health and social dimensions of this problem. So if it is on one side very important to have pharmacological support for people, this doesn't resolve the situation. So I don't think, also because time is flying, I don't think we can answer any specific question, but in a way your interventions addressed all of them already. We have 2 minutes left. I don't know if any of you in the audience would like to say a final statement, but that this is the beginning. We will have other webinars. We will invite time zone allowing the Australians colleagues that Tiago mentioned before. There is a huge number of researchers that are working for this objective, and we want to hear from all of them. Anyone wants to add something? Giovanna says no. Anya says no. I don't want to ask more from our executive director. She was very kind in giving us all her time in a very, very, believe me, busy moment of her work. So with this, I thank our audience. I adore, if you follow the chat, the way they help each other. If one has a technical problem, others jump in to say help. So it's really a nice learning communities of people that is following us throughout our webinars. Thank you very much. Thank you to Anna Ferrara, silent and fundamental organizer. Without her, these webinars wouldn't exist. So thank you, everyone.